It's that time of the week again. It's time for Programming by Stealth, and this is part B of Tidbit 17, also recorded in December 2025, and I am still your host, Bart Puschatz. This recording covers the second half of the Tidbit 17 tutorial at pps.bartartificer.net/tidbit17, and again, it features myself in the role of student and friend of the show, Helma van der Linden, as the guest teacher. This is a continuation of the introduction Helma very kindly offered to Docker, a tool which, as you've now heard in Part A, is very relevant to developers. Helma, thank you for coming back. So just to catch us up quickly, so anyone reading the show notes are going to have one continuous, giant, big, wonderful piece of learning. But those listening, this is now the start of our second half. And so just a reminder that in the first half, we explained what the problem is that Docker helps us solve, especially with our developer hat on. And we learned about how to do it. And we successfully built a Docker image to host the demo Jekyll site from the most recent installments of Programming by Stealth series on Jekyll. And you left us on a little cliffhanger where we could reuse our images. So that is where we're going to resume our story.
Yes, as I said before, we can reuse this Docker setup that we made with our demo site and reuse it in the full PBS project, because that's also a Jekyll site.
Yes.
So the simplest way that we could do is copy the files over, so the Docker file, the Docker Compose, and the make file to the root of the PBS project, and then we were done, basically, especially because the demo site is just a temporary project and we can throw it away. But what if it's another important project that you want to keep and develop further? There is nothing wrong with just copying, but first of all, you can't run the containers side by side because there are some exposed ports that you would get a port conflict. But there are more subtle problems. The container name should be changed, as we said before. But also, remember that we copied the gem file into the image and then ran bundle install. So the gems are inside the image already. That's nice for being up and running. But what if the gem file of your PBS project has different requirements than the gem file of your other project? Then they would share the gem files and you're back to a light version of dependency hell.
Yes, and that is realistic because depending on which plugins you want, you're going to have different gems.
Yes. So the first thing we have to do is take that building of the gem file inside the image, out of the image, and put it in the Docker Compose, because then each container can have its own version of the required gems.
Okay. So now I'm starting to understand the power of this compose file versus the image file, because the image file is way more work to change, whereas that compose file is YAML. It's nice and human friendly.
Yes.
And so doing your customizations there makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. So if we go back to our analogy, we could say that these two food trucks that we are going to build, they started off with having the same available set of knives, but now we are going to split it and give each one their own dedicated set of knives.
Okay, so my fish food truck is going to have a really good fillet knife, and my kebab shop is going to have this giant big thing for whacking away at big pieces of meat.
Exactly. So that also means that you can have complete isolation again, because the fish truck doesn't have to know about the kebab tools, and the kebab tools truck doesn't have to know about the fish knife.
Yeah, because obviously the other approach would be, we put all the gems everywhere, and then the gems will start fighting with each other, and we're back to square one.
Yes, that's what I said. Now we have to figure out how to make bundle install run before bundle exec Jekyll serve is run, because that was the first command we ran in the container.
And just for the listeners, so Jekyll serve can't execute until the actual dependencies are in place. And that's what Bundler is doing. So we definitely have to make sure we preserve this order here.
Yes. The first thing we could do is just remove the Jekyll serve command out of the container and tell the user to run it manually. But that's kind of defeating the purpose.
Yeah, it was kind of nice to have the default command there because it just makes everything a little bit easier for everyone.
Yeah. And it will put the mental load on you to remember to having to run it.
Yes, instead of just start this Docker and everything is perfect. Yeah, the whole point is it's supposed to be atomic, that you just started and everything is taken care of. So we should do that.
Yes. Let's make it easy and make sure that Docker is handling all this. And first we have to make an entry point into the Docker file. And an entry point is a way to configure a container to run as a kind of executable. So if we tell the endpoint to run a script, the script will automatically run on the start of the container.
Oh, so it's like the old, what is it, system.bat or whatever on Windows, that every time the thing boots up, I do this.
Yes. So basically, if you open a shell, all the shell RC stuff is run. So this is basically the same. So we can add this script to the Docker file, so we don't have to manage a separate script. And we do it with, what I showed in the show notes is a new version of the Docker file. So it still starts with from Ruby 3.3. It still does the install Node.js. It still installs Bundler. It still says the working directory is the project root and we call it site.
Yeah.
But then we copy a here document, which is the marker EOF, and then a whole script to user local bin Docker endpoint.
Okay, so we're now making a file that's going to exist inside the container.
Yes.
And in the container's universe, it will be called user local bin docker-entry point.sh. I'm going to guess that's one of those magic file names that Docker looks for.
Well, it's not a magic file name. It is in a Linuxy way, obvious location, user local bin. And later on, we just tell him, run this script. But because we call it Docker endpoint, it's kind of a convention.
Okay, so convention, so it's not like .bash or C where you have to call it that. It's a convention, which is probably a very good convention. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the way a here doc works is that basically everything on the line after that copy, so everything from line 17 until you meet the pattern EOF, which is another convention, by the way, that you could put the pattern waffles, but EOF is an abbreviation of end of file, which is why it's a convention that Linux people love. So we're saying we're going to run a bash script, yay. Set -e Trainer, that means if there's an error, we crash rather than continuing, does it?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Only install update if needed. Aha. Efficiency. I approve.
Yes.
So we're saying if the gem file exists, then if -f is, that means if it does exist?
If it exists, then we run bundle check to see if it is necessary to update. And if that gives you the error or the exit code that tells it, no, there is something wrong, you have to install or update, then it runs the rest.
Okay, so now I understand.
The bundle install.
So the if gem file is basically saying, do we need any gems at all? Because hypothetically, this has now become completely generic, so you could have this script somewhere where there is no gem file and it wouldn't break.
Yes.
It would just go,
Yes.
oh, okay, no gems. I'll carry on with life. But it says, oh, there is a
Yeah.
gem file. Then we have a second if statement, and the command bundle check is the gem file way of saying, hey, am I up to date?
Yes.
And that will either return, yes, I am up to date, or no, I'm not up to date. And if it isn't up to date, then you echo a cute little emoji installing gems, and then you run bundle install, which will actually, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that will pick up changes to your gems if you decide to upgrade something. And I've never done this before. So you're dealing with both conditions. Cool.
And then it executes the main command, and lo and behold, I just copied this in from ChatGPT.
I wish I remembered enough. I think what you're doing is executing the script you just wrote.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Then, of course, we make this file executable.
chmod plus
and then,
X. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The expose 4000 is still there. And then we get this new command, entry point, and that's the file.
Now, I noticed that's an array. So if we had a more complicated setup where we needed to initialize 3 or 4 things, we could call more than one entry point.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, or add parameters. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, sorry, add parameters. Of course. Yes. The same as with the CMD that we talked about last time. Okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
So this basically means that this entry point will run, and then the command will run unless we overwrite it. So your Jekyll file, your Jekyll site is up and running again. But now with a gem file that is dedicated to the project.
Yeah, so this has now become a lot more generic than our hard-coded, this runs the demo site, this now runs any Jekyll site.
Yes.
Cool.
If we go on, we have to take care of the Docker Compose file, because now it has to make sure that the correct gem file is available for this entry point script.
Yes.
And, of course, what we also want to do is make this Docker Compose file more generic, because otherwise you'll get these copy and paste bugs where you copy, paste, change half of the variables and forget the rest. And then a whole lot of problems come up. So what we could do is introduce variables in the Docker Compose file and add a .env file.
We hinted at this last time, right? Because I had mentioned that you want to be able to parameterize this. So here we are. Yeah. These are our parameters. Okay. So environment variables or an env file. Oh, that's very powerful. So if you set them as environment variables, then that works in places like GitHub Actions and stuff where environment variables are easy to push. And on my developer machine, it's probably easier for me to define variables in a local file, something.env.
Yeah.
So I have the choice. Oh, I like this.
Yes. Yeah.
One question. The env file, is that in, what format are they in? Oh, no, it's later in the show notes. Ignore me.
It's later in the show notes. Yeah. So we go back to our Docker Compose file. We still have one service called Jekyll.
Mm-hmm.
This Jekyll now uses an image, and the image is the variable base image, which defaults to Jekyll base latest.
Okay.
And this is something we have to call our image. And then later on, we can tell it what the base image will be. Now we can also make a variable for the container name. So if there is no variable container _name, we default to Jekyll-site.
Makes sense.
For the ports as well, we default Jekyll underscore port to 4000 and live reload underscore port to whatever the number is there.
Yeah.
Then we go on and we have our volume where we map the current project directory to /site.
Actually, I'm going to back you up for 1 second here. So the syntax here is we're saying the variable Jekyll port, and then the colon minus just means or defaulted to. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
This
okay.
is basically the same as in Bash. In Bash, this is the same syntax for defining a default variable, a default value for a variable.
Well, I've learned two things now because I didn't know that in Bash either.
Okay. Yeah, it works like that.
Okay. All right. So we're saying if you specified a variable, use that.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yes.
well, just use 4000. So that's nice and friendly on the user, because if you didn't bother setting up an end file, this is still going to work. So it's going to take the Jekyll base image, it's going to call it Jekyll site, it's going to take port 4000. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll skip the volumes for a second.
Yeah.
If we go on, the working there is still site/docs. And we also can add environment variables that become available inside the Docker image.
Oh, so they get put into the image's environment. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. For example, we can do a Jekyll _env, which defaults to development.
Yeah. Okay. And so just for the listeners, this is a Jekyll feature we're now controlling through Docker. So when you run Jekyll, it will check for something called Jekyll env, which can either be production or development, and it will render things differently depending on whether you're developing. I think development shows you the drafts or something by default, doesn't it? I can't remember the difference, but it does different things.
Yeah. Yes. Right. But this is pure Jekyll stuff. But this way you can manage it through your Docker environment.
Yeah.
And because we have sensible defaults, we could say we specify a .env file for the PBS situation and use this without any .env file for the demo site, because there are all sensible defaults.
Yes. Yeah, so the power of those defaults is very, very important for your own sanity. So I'm really happy that you showed us the correct way of doing this.
Yeah. So let's do the env file first, and then we come back to the volumes.
Perfect.
Because there is a little bit more to tell about the volumes. So in the show notes, I showed a very large .env file with lots of comments.
Lots of comments. I mean, what is it? 1, 2, 3. There's only about 6 lines of actual content. The rest of it is very helpful comments. And I'm just going to jump in here for the listeners. So the syntax of this file is so-called ini format, which dates back to Windows 3.1. And it's basically name equals value, name equals value. So it's nice and simple.
Yeah, actually, I think this is also Bash syntax.
Actually, well, in this case, it's so generic, it kind of works all over the place, doesn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, and what you see in the show notes is the definition for the demo site. So basically, except for the compose project name and the container name, all the variables are just set to their defaults.
Yeah, we call it demo site, which is a very sensible thing to call it. Instead of calling it Jekyll base, we're calling it demo. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Okay, we can go on and also make the makefile more generic and use this .env file. So at the top, you see all the phony targets. Then we can include the .env file and export all these variables.
Okay, and what you've now just done is proven the fact that I was wrong to say this is in ini format. This is definitely Bash variables, which is why you can say the magic word include.
Yes, and you can export the variables so they become available.
Yes.
Inside this makefile. What we also did here is we define the default Docker file location if it's not set in env.
Yeah.
And this is not my preferred way of doing it. I prefer to have the Docker file next to my project. But since we are going to make a reusable image, you might decide to have a directory where you have, for every kind of project you want, your generic files, like your Docker files. So in this case, Docker images /Jekyll -github -pages /Docker file.
Yes, and the tilde there means my home directory, just as a reminder to
Yes.
users.
Yes.
Yeah, so you would have a personal library of your favorite Docker files, basically.
Yes. And of course, we create a variable. This is a make variable because it uses :is rather
the
than
colon equals sign. Yeah.
Yes. And it allows spaces rather than in bash where everything is smudged together.
Cuddled together, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a variable called Dockerfile, which figures out the path of the Docker file. I'm not going to go into much detail, but because we included the env file, we had to update the grep and awk command in the help section to make sure that it would run correctly. If you are interested, you can compare both versions and figure out the differences.
Yeah, so this file has gotten extremely elegant with lots of colors and things. So this has now become a really good example of a very production file. But the important stuff has stayed very similar.
Yeah, so because we have that env file, we can now echo some configuration information from that file.
Yeah.
So if you run make, which runs make help because help is the default target, you will see this project container Docker file, Jekyll URL, live reload, whatever. And then it goes on and lists all the target that you have defined in this make file.
Yeah.
So what we have to do now is make sure that before we can start the container, the image should be available, because the image is not run automatically because there is a Docker file. We explicitly said in the Docker compose, use this image.
Yes. Yeah, whereas before we were relying on having a special file name, now we've explicitly said which one to use.
To build this image, we created a make target called prebuild base, prebuild-base.
Okay.
Which goes on to figure out where is it? Do I want it to be verbose? Which I don't think we even set that variable, whatever. And then it goes on to build just the image with is basically Docker build. Take the file, Docker file that is in this path and build a base image with this name.
Yes. So you now had to add an extra argument to say, use that file. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then of course it does some error detection and etc.
Yeah.
But if it's there, it just goes on and doesn't do anything. So our make up that we used last time now doesn't just run Docker compose upd, which it does basically. But before that, it ensures that the base image is available. So there is a separate target called ensure base, which checks if the image exists, and if not, it will rebuild. It calls the rebuild base.
Yes. Yeah, so ensure base is defined, and then under that we say up ensure base, and then we go ahead and we do our Docker compose minus d.
Yeah. So the rest of our make targets are basically the same, but the up and the serve are now dependent on the ensure base target to make sure that whatever you want to do, if you want to run the container, then you first have to make sure the image is available.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is all very sensible. Remember, when you're looking at this in the show notes, listeners, it's intimidating because it's very well self-documenting. Everything that starts with @echo is just this file putting nice human-friendly output. So the real work is actually not that much more than before. It just has a lot of very nice, helpful output.
Yeah. Yeah. And because we are now and updating our gem file through the container rather than having it statically built in the image, we now also have make targets that do update gems. So they update all the gems to the latest version, or they check if the gems are installed and up to date, or you can add a gem if you want
That's
to.
very, very considerate of this file.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a good idea, though, because it saves you having to remember all the details. You just say, oh, make add gem.
Yes. And if you don't remember the commands, you just run make, and it tells you what's available and what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And it takes off a lot of remembrance.
Yeah, all of these little things you're always trying to remember. What was the command for gem? Because I almost never use gem unless I'm working with Jekyll. But this way, the make file I figure it out once, I stick it in the make file, and I never have to figure it out again. I like this.
Yeah. Let's go back to the compose file. And as I already said, it's now using this .env file, and it's defining which image to use. So another change is the definition of a named volume.
Yes.
If we look at the compose file, there are two new things that I skipped over initially. One is in the volumes section, we not have one, but we have two mappings.
Yes.
One is the original project root /site, and the other one is called gems.
Yes.
And it maps to user local bundle. And this is what Docker calls a named volume.
Okay.
And it's a volume that is managed by Docker. And so you have two kinds of volumes. One is the first one, the first type. You decide, I have some project directory somewhere that I map to this location inside the container.
Right.
The other one is a named volume, and this one is called gems. And this is entirely handled by Docker. So Docker creates some file storage somewhere on your machine.
Okay, so I'm just going to back up a sec. So with the first type, we are saying this real folder, which I have chosen and I look after, gets mapped to this folder inside the image. And the next one, you're saying, I don't care where the real folder is. I just want a folder that won't evaporate. You look after it, Docker. I just wanted to call it gems, and you'll keep it somewhere safe, and I don't care about it.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, if we want to reuse this Docker Compose file, and we call this volume gems, if you would run a second project with this same Docker Compose file, you would get a clash because both have the same gems volume. So either they are using the same gems, so we're back to...
It wouldn't be a good idea for gems, but it might be a good idea for another kind of data that you do want to share globally.
Yes. But Docker has this convention. If you specify the variable compose _project _name, Docker Compose will create the volume with that name as a prefix to _gems. Okay. So your volume will be the project name _gems. And in that case, both will be the same, will be different volumes.
Yes, because you're going to have different project names. So you now have each one gets its own gems. Okay.
Yeah. So, and we don't care where the gems are, and we don't have to manage or git ignore a directory with gems installed inside your project directory, because they are managed by the container and they are out of sight for your project.
Okay. No, that is, set it and forget it storage. I just need this to be somewhere. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. So we don't have to bother with, like if you install Node.js, you will get this Node _modules directory. and Ruby will install gems somewhere. Now we tell it, just do it inside the container, rather in a volume, so we won't lose them when we restart the container. But don't litter my project with it.
Yeah, because if you then add Git into the workflow, if you had the gems folder sitting in your Git project, then you would have to add it to the .git ignore file, or you would make a giant big mess. Whereas this way, you're just saying to Docker, put it somewhere. Don't make me look at it. Don't make me see it.
Yes.
Don't make it get in my way.
Yes.
You magic it away somewhere. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what they call a named volume. And just for the record, the last 2 lines in this Docker Compose file, there you state that there is a volume which is called gems, and Docker Compose of Docker can handle it. So, that's...
We have 2 volumes in the service, and we have only 1 volume down below, because we're only telling Docker to worry about one. The other one we are worrying about because we want to.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So basically we define the gems as a volume.
Gotcha.
So now we go back. With this volume, we also make sure that installing gems every time the start of the container, at the start of the container, is now gone. It also avoids this slow process of installing gems every time the container starts, because they're already there.
Yes.
So your container will, the first time, of course, it won't start quickly, but all the other times it will it will start very quickly.
Yes.
And remember I said you don't have to look at the Docker desktop dashboard?
Yes.
Well, if you want to make sure, if you want to know what's in there, you can go to the dashboard and you will see your volumes there as well. And you can actually look inside a volume. So in this case, the Docker _site_gems volume will be there, and you can click on it and it will open and you will see all the files that were installed in there.
So should you need to debug something, it's not...
Yes.
You haven't decided where to put it and it's not your problem, but it's not hidden from you.
True.
Yeah.
And should you decide, I want to start over, you can throw it away in the Docker desktop dashboard and everything starts over again. What changed in the makefile, we already went through that.
Yeah.
So now we still can do a make space up, and then our Jekyll server will run. So we're basically back to the situation before we did this rewrite.
Yeah. So our experience hasn't gotten any more complicated. The complication is completely hidden from us, and it's all in that makefile.
Yes.
Perfect.
So now we can go on and copy this Docker configuration to the PBS project.
Yes.
First, we do a make down just to be sure that everything is clear. Yes. Otherwise, we might run into problems where we want the default to be in the PBS project while it's still active for the demo site and vice versa. So you only have to copy 4 files: the Docker file, the Docker Compose file, the .env, and the make file. And the only thing we actually have to change is the .env file.
Yes, because everything else was completely generic, and it was using variables, and those variables are all self-contained in the env file.
Yeah.
So this explains why all of this effort was so valuable, because everything is generic except for the env, and the env is 100% not generic. Everything in the env file you do want to specify. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
First, now that we have copied everything, we can try and figure out if it's truly reusable.
Okay.
So we brought down the Docker container for the demo site. We are now going to run with all these 4 files exactly the same we can't do run it and we do a make up.
Right.
And then, does it work? Well, in this case, it didn't work because we were missing a repo.
Ah.
And what happened was there was a problem in the Jekyll setup.
That doesn't surprise me because the PBS site's Jekyll is the very first Jekyll I ever did. And I didn't know what I was doing.
What you did is you relied fully on whatever GitHub pages said regarding variables.
So it's doing magic sauce in the background, and I didn't in any way account for that.
Yes. So the actual error, if you look at make space logs, you can see the log files, and it shows no repo name found. Specify using pages underscore repo underscore NWO environment variable, or set the repository
in your configuration.
Yeah, or set up an origin git remote. Well, the origin is already there. So it's either the environment variable or there is this repository element that should be added.
And that seems like the better thing to do is to do it with that repository. Yeah.
So this is not a Docker problem. This is a Jekyll configuration problem.
Yeah, and just to be very specific for listeners, this is basically the PBS site works perfectly as a GitHub action because that's the only place we've really been using it. But GitHub actions they come with some free bonus extra. A GitHub action knows about the repository it is a member of because the action exists as part of the PBS repository. But we're now duplicating that GitHub action locally.
Yeah.
And our local machine doesn't actually know where in the Git universe this came from. So we're just telling it, no, this is, in this case, Bartificer / programming -by -stealth.
Yeah. So there are several solutions to this problem. One is to just set this environment in the compose file and in the .env file. Or we can add the repository element to the docs/_config.yaml file.
Yeah.
And the latter one is either picked up or overridden by GitHub pages, so there would be no difference between the GitHub pages and our local Docker environment.
So
however,
that's a sensible thing to do.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. But since we have no possibility to check if it would accidentally break production, other than go ahead and figure out if it breaks production, we can go with a sensible override. So what we can do is we can make a dev version of this config file and tell the bundle to use both the config and the config dev file. So in the container, we can use both, and GitHub Pages doesn't know or doesn't care about the GitHub dev file and only use the _doc, the config file. Okay. So that's what we did. And what we do is we create in the docs directory an _config_dev.yaml file. And we can only add the repository element that we actually need, which just points.
So it's a file of one line.
Yes. Yeah. And then we go on to the Docker Compose file and we update our command, which overrides the command in the image. And we add at the end a --config, which mentions both config files.
Aha. So we are saying that within our Docker universe, when you start Jekyll, load 2 config files, not 1.
Yeah.
And as far as the real world, the production server is concerned, it only uses _config.yaml, which is Jekyll's default.
Yeah.
So no matter how silly we get in this dev file, we can't break the main website.
Yes. So, and this is where this Docker Compose file for the PBS project will differ from the Docker Compose from our demo site, because in the demo site, we don't have this problem, or at least we don't think we have.
Yeah.
If it would exist in the demo site, we can solve it in a similar way, because the change is the repository name of the project, which is in this docker_dev file, which would be changed different in
Which would be in
both
Git.
projects. Yes, and it would be in Git, but the Docker Compose file would be the same.
Yes, yeah, because you haven't made the change in the Docker Compose, you've
Yeah.
made the change within the meat of the project.
Yes. So now that we changed the compose file, we have to rebuild the container. And we can do that with a make restart, which basically does a make down and then a make up.
Yeah.
Any of the file changes will trigger Jekyll to rebuild the site and automatically update your browser. Sometimes the outcome doesn't meet your expectations, or you see an error where you don't expect one, or vice versa. You expect an error and it isn't there. So the quickest way is to clean everything, rebuild, and start over. And you can do that with make clean -all.
Yeah.
And then, so you start back at square one and everything runs again. And
Makes sense.
of course, once you fix a problem, you get an error for the next problem.
All right, because problems mask each other.
Yes.
So one of the most common mistakes in beginner developers is they run the compile command and it gives them one error. They fix that and they get 5 errors, and their solution is, oh, let's undo our last change. That made it worse. But that's not true.
Yeah.
So we've now fixed one problem, and now the thing has gone further in its process and something else broke.
Yes. So what if you look at the site as it is in this state, you will see the info, but you don't see any markup. You know, don't see any images. You don't see any CSS applied, whatever. And when you go deep down, what happened when you inspect it, you see that all the images are expected to be at /pages /Bartificer /programming-buys-stealth /assets /logo. And the problem lies in the fact that the theme, which is an external theme to our project, uses a variable called site.github.base URL.
Right.
And that is prefixed to the assets-logo.png.
Yes.
So GitHub Pages will resolve this and it will work perfectly fine, but it won't work in our local environment.
Yes, and that is, again, the GitHub action is doing magic, which we haven't replicated locally.
Yes, yeah. So there are 2 ways to solve this problem, and we will try both. One is to modify the template file, and one is to disable the GitHub behavior. And so the first thing we can do is override the layout file. Jekyll supports a sort of overriding hierarchy. You can use the template file, but if you have a local template file, that will override the template file that comes from the theme.
Yeah, so this is how you customize a theme, is by creating local copies that will replace the version provided by the theme.
Yes. So what you can do is you can create a file in a directory called _layouts/ and then the file called default.html. You copy in all the information from this same file from the theme, and then you replace all the site.github.base URL variables with the path to the file without any prefix, followed by a filter, so pipe, and then relative _URL, which makes a relative URL relative to the site root.
Sure. This is brittle because if the parent theme gets updated to make it nicer, you've now just gone and basically stopped your site ever seeing that update. So obviously there's a better way.
Yes. Sure, we can try this, but again, we have to do a make clean all to avoid any caching.
Makes sense.
And again, we don't know what will happen if we put this in GitHub Pages? Well, because
Yes.
GitHub Pages will also take this default file, and what will happen there? And again, the only thing to figure out if it works is actually doing the stuff we have to make it fall over.
Yes. Yeah. So this is why I can't help but notice in the show notes our underscore config underscore dev.yaml has entered the scene again.
Yes.
Because it is completely isolated to our local copy. And the problem is a variable. And Jekyll lets us define variables.
Yeah.
So you just define the variable to be the empty string.
Yes. So in the actual project, I just renamed this default file so it wouldn't be picked up by Jekyll. But you can take it out again because, as you said, and I wasn't even aware of that, you now copied a layout which has to be updated when the actual theme changes. So, as you said, we add it to the underscore config underscore dev file, and we just basically set this variable to be something else than what GitHub Pages will put in there. And now we can do a final make clean all and make up. And then we see the PBS file in a nice formatted way in our browser, locally, not on the internet.
Which is very useful to help us debug various problems and things. So I know that was going to make Alison extremely happy. And me, to be honest.
Now that we have this up and running again, we now want to run both containers side by side. Because that would be nice. First of all, we copied the .env file. So if you would look at the logs, the PBS project would be called demo site because that's still in the env file. So the only thing we can do is we bring the container down with make /down, and then we can change the .env file and start it up again.
Right. And so all of those defaults, we now want to set a value so that it's not using the defaults anymore. So we rename our project. And I can see you've chosen very sensible stuff here in the show notes. So project name, PBS.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Container name, same thing. Great. Yeah. And now I see the magic. So we can't have two things on port 4000.
Right.
Because that's not how the universe, that literally 2 into 1 won't go.
Yes.
So you're saying, let's put this site on port 8080, which is a very common thing to do.
Yeah.
And the reload port you've increased by 1, is it? To
yes, I did.
35730.
Because then we don't care about this live reload port.
Yeah.
And we could basically do without the .env file in the demo site, because that one will use the default values, and the default is 29.
Yes. So we're basically saying this very specific site, we're not using the defaults, we're asserting our name, we're choosing our ports, and now we can say make up in both of our directories.
Yes.
Both Jekylls will run.
Yeah.
And we will be able to test two sites at the same time.
Yeah.
We can multitask to our heart's content.
Yes. The only thing you can do in the env file for your demo site is point the Docker file path to the Docker file in your PBS project, so that you have the same image should it not exist.
Okay. Yeah, and again, we have the power to mess with all of these things.
Yes.
Because it's in the end file.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, it's a nice little optimization.
In this case, we can run both a clean all and a make up, and then both containers sit side by side. And your demo site is now on localhost 4000, and your PBS site is on localhost 8080.
Yeah. And so if you're a person looking after 5 or 6 websites, you just edit each of your end files so they're all different, and then you can start as many or as few at the same time and never have to worry about it again.
Yes. And all the complexity in the Docker file and the Docker compose file, you don't have to look at again, because you only have to change the .env file. Yeah.
Because that's all in the end. Excellent. That is very powerful. Yeah.
So
Cool.
And we only added 4 files to these projects. And of course, we did a little bit of magic in the _config_dev file.
Yeah. Yeah, which is very Jekyll specific and not really Docker specific. So in a
Right.
generic Docker sense, it's 4 files.
Yeah. And for any Jekyll file now, you could just copy the Docker compose of the demo site and the make file and the env file and change it, and you have your new Docker environment.
And if you're going to do a lot of work with Jekyll and it would be worth your effort, you could go a super step and you could use Git submodules to actually separate your Jekyll brains into a submodule that you could then include into your other Git repositories. And that is an exercise for the listener. Because
Yes.
we did talk about submodules.
Yeah.
And so you could genericize it even more. So if you use Jekyll all the time, and you might want to optimize your make file in one place and have that work everywhere for you, then you would want its own Git or Git repo for your Jekyll brilliance.
Yeah.
But in this case, this is perfect. And it's 4 simple files, and you can commit them to Git.
Yes.
Which means that we can now update in a very, very controlled way. We can make a dev branch.
Yeah.
We can experiment with upgrading our gem files, test it locally, make sure nothing explodes.
Yeah.
And then push and merge into main.
Yes.
Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah.
All of our tools are connecting together here. Okay, so PBS, of course, is a little bit more complicated than just a Jekyll website.
Yes.
Because Bart can't spell.
Yeah.
This is the problem here, is I can't spell.
Yeah.
And I write my markdown in a nice code editor, which doesn't tell me when I'm talking absolute gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
So many, many years ago, you got fed up of me having silly typos everywhere.
Yeah.
And you very kindly created a linter using an open source project called Veilspell and added it as a GitHub action.
Yes.
Which means on the live production website, whenever I push to main, I get a little report telling me how silly I am.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to get that same functionality locally instead of through a GitHub action. So, of course, why couldn't Docker run Veil?
Yeah, sure. And why couldn't run Docker what we have in a GitHub action now? So we can go on and look at the problem to be solved, because the problem is you push to Git, GitHub action runs your Veil configuration, and it shows you all the errors, but you have to go over there, figure out all the typos, change them in your local file, do an update again, push to GitHub, and then the whole process starts again. So
this has the it's not even an advantage. This has a side effect that the whole universe gets to see how badly I spell, because there are 2 pushes.
Yes, yeah. And
if I could run this locally, I could hide my inability to spell from the universe.
Not only that, because Veil runs on all the files at once. So you see a giant list of files with errors and suggestions, and you probably don't go through all of them at once. So you fix a few typos.
Not working on something.
Yeah, you fix some typos, you do a commit, and then it comes back and spits this giant output again without minus the views that you fixed. And so you will get lots and lots of commits just to fix a few typos.
Yeah.
So we can run it locally in a Docker environment. And
of course we can, because Docker can run anything.
Yes. Yeah. What we want is we want to use the same configuration as the GitHub Actions does. So we can run it in both environments. And sure enough, not only you, but I too ignore the output of Veil in the GitHub actions. Only when I think it's silly, I go in and fix it. But also, if you run it locally, it runs much faster because it doesn't have to build up the whole environment before it can actually go to work.
But also, when you're running it as a GitHub action, you're literally being put in a queue. It's some server somewhere on the internet that you have no control over is doing everyone's GitHub actions one after the other. And if it's busy in that queue, your spell check will wait.
Yeah.
Whereas if you run it locally, well, it's on demand.
Yeah. So the first thing we have to do is we have to install Veil. And there are two ways to install it. One is in the image and one is on demand in the makefile.
So we are going to expand our existing image so that it does both Jekyll and Linden.
Okay, yeah. Not right now.
Or are we doing a separate environment?
We're now just installing Veil in our container as we need.
So it is the same container?
It's the container of the PBS project. And if you don't use this make target, it won't be installed.
So that makes sense.
In the show notes, you see there is, for the make file, now a target called lint, because Veil calls itself a linter.
Yeah.
It makes sure that the base is installed, so the image is there, etc. And then it runs Docker compose with a shell script to install Veil inside the container. And then it goes on and runs Veil.
Okay.
So you see it checks if, so what it does, Docker compose run, and then the --rm means clean up after yourself. We add a column to the environment, a column variable, which tells Veil to use 300 positions. Otherwise, you will get a teeny tiny column with lots of wrapping and it's not readable. We tell it -w means the working directory. So inside the root of the project, basically, of the Jekyll service, we run a shell script and the command follows. And the command is, if Veil doesn't exist, we are going to install Veil. We do a wget of the tar file, which we then expand to use a local bin. We remove this tar file, we clean up after ourselves, we make our Veil executable, and then we run it. And there are two variables here. Yeah.
Let me just think this through logically. So we've started our Docker image, so it's now running.
Yes.
And the first time after starting that image that we call the new make target lint, it does this full install.
Yes.
And the second time it will go, do I need to do that? No, I've already done that. Do I need to do that? No, I've already done that.
Yeah.
But next week, when I restart the image, it is going to reinstall itself once.
Yes.
But this doesn't look like a very complex installation process here. This probably takes like a second.
Yeah. It's not very, very. Most of the time you spend waiting is because Veil is going through all the files.
And that's always going to be true, right? It doesn't matter whether it was pre-installed or not. So if this was a complicated install, we could use another one of those named volumes and let Docker effectively cache a copy for us between instances. But since this is so simple, we don't have to waste our time with another volume.
True. And of course, we want to figure out if this is going to work. So this way, we don't have to mess with the container. And if this doesn't work...
If we screw this up completely, we just say, make clean all, and we start over.
Yes. Yeah. So if Veil runs correctly, you will see a giant output of all the files it went over and all the suggestions and whatever errors it thinks it found. And what I put in the show notes is a snippet of something it found in Tidbit 11 and something it found in Tidbit 14. And
it's interesting that some of them are Bartisms and some of them are mistakes.
yes.
Because bashi is a word I made up and I'm going to keep with. But writing spelt wrong is wrong.
Yeah. And so I took a few other ones. Intial, which you see in the last line of the
That's a real typical one for me. Just get the letters in the wrong order. They're all the right letters.
There is another tool for that. It's called Espanzo. You can use that one. Anyway, and spikely is also probably a typo. But cybersecurity is just jargon.
It's a new word.
Yeah.
Because 2 or 3 years ago it was nonsense, but now it's literally my job.
Yeah.
Actually, my title.
Yeah, so I was wondering, should it be cyberspace security or just cybersecurity?
No, it's become one word.
Okay.
And the reason is because without the word cybersecurity, cyberspace security people get confused with security guards. Because you have a department for physical security and you have a department for cybersecurity, and there is no overlap. I know nothing about the door locks.
No.
And the door lock people know nothing about antivirus.
Yeah. So, okay. So what we want to do is you go to these files. So in Tidbit 14, you find the word initial on line 200. That's what it says in the last line of the snippet in the show notes. And then you can fix it, or you check it and maybe it should be that word because you had another word made up. But anyway, you can go in and fix it. But the word cybersecurity is the jargon, or bashi is the Bartisms that you want to keep. But you don't want fail to complain about it. So you put it in a file called accept.txt, which is in .github/styles/config/vocabularies/pbs in capitals. And that is just a list of words. And any word in there, fail will accept as being correct. And over the years, I've already put many words in there. But you can go through them and take out what you think is incorrect, and you can add more.
Yeah.
And once you add them in, fail will not complain about them anymore.
Yes. And the reason they're in a folder named .github is because they need to be available to GitHub Actions. And that's where GitHub Actions wants to be.
Yeah. And I'm not going in the complete configuration of Veil here. Maybe we can do that in a separate episode. But
that's not really a Docker problem, right?
No.
It's a Veil problem.
Right. So if you fix these problems, so you put the cybersecurity and the bashi in the accept.txt, and you fix the typos, and you run make lint again, the number of errors should go down. And I've always find it a joyous game to make the errors as less as possible, unless I get fed up. Because right now there are some 400 something errors in there. Not all of them are actual errors. I mean, if you look at the Tidbit 14, it says ever is repeated. If you go in and you wanted to say, don't ever, ever, ever do it like this, then it's correct that it should be there. And there are ways of telling Veil to ignore that specific part. But that's
of that specific file or whatever instead of universal.
Yeah. So every now and then I go in, fix the obvious typos, bring the errors down. But now that it's in our local environment, it's much easier to run this.
Yes, so it'll be done more.
Yeah.
Which will make it better.
Yeah. But of course, you can also install it in the image, because you probably want to have this for your other images, for your other projects as well.
Yeah, realistically, the job of Jekyll is to publish content. So a spell checker is always relevant when you're publishing content. It doesn't
Yes.
matter whether it's PBS or something else.
Yeah.
So it makes completely perfect sense that we make this part of our generic Jekyll image, which we have ready to go.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like that should be difficult because we install it with a simple wget.
Yeah.
So I was very pleased when I scroll down in the show notes and I can see that the changes are very minimal here, that you've had to do very little to make this work.
Yes. Yes. So what we do, we simply put the installation instructions in the Docker file. So after the
so they were in that make file.
Yes.
So just for the listeners, when you scroll up, there's no new commands here. What we've done is we've taken them from the make file where they happen when you run the make target, and we've put them right into the point where we build the image. So now they're just baked in. So they're just, as soon as I boot up this, I don't know if you use the word boot for a Docker image. So as soon as you run the Docker image, it will be there as if it was part of the operating system.
Yeah. And now, of course, we have to do a make rebuild base because the image changed. The Docker file changed, so the image must change.
Yeah.
And then we can simplify the make file. And the whole if statement to install the linter fail is now removed, and we end up with this simple Docker compose file. Well, it's not simple because it has a lot of arguments, but it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can even go on, and because there are a few variables in there, like the level, we can make a makefile target which says lint-warnings. So you set the level to warning, or lint-error, where you set the level to errors only. And
so shout at me about the worst problems, or shout at me about all the problems.
Yes. And of course, because fail runs over the entire set of pages, we can also make a make target called lint-file. And in the description, we say how you can use it. So you can run fail on just one file, which makes it easier to start figuring out what should be changed, etc.
Excellent. Now, you went even further in the show notes, and I think we're going to leave this as an exercise as a bit of bonus content here. But the other thing we have done over the years is taming the terminal, right? Before there was programming by stealth, there was taming the terminal. And myself and Alison had done Taming the Terminal as a podcast/blog series, and it was actually on my old personal website. It didn't even have its own website. They were random blog posts spread across bartpuschatz.ie. And yourself and Alison, as a present to me without telling me, surprised me by converting these random blog posts of mine into a beautiful Git repository which built a full book. Which was available both on the web as a very pretty HTML rendering, which is really useful. I look at it all the time. And it could also actually be published as an ebook. And Alison even had it printed as a book, which if I had been a little more prepared, I could have right here to bang on the desk to make it clear how heavy it is.
Yes.
But it is a full book. And the tooling you used to build that book is something called ASCII Doctor, which is kind of like Markdown, but I think it's probably slightly older than Markdown, and it comes from the world of books. So it has concepts that are relevant to a book that would not be relevant to a web page. So it's better about making an index and page numbers, because page numbers aren't relevant to a blog post or whatever, but on a book, that seems important.
Yes, and of course, it's you can call it Markdown on steroids because it allows for extra syntax for more complex tables and all kinds of things. Yeah,
tables are not Markdown strong point.
No,
to put it very mildly.
Yes. So this is also a Ruby project, and if we go back to the very first beginning, we said there were two problems we could solve with this Docker environment. One was the dependency hell, and one was having to run outdated old versions of Ruby in this case to run this ASCII doctor build setup. So what I did here is I moved everything into a Docker environment. And in this case, ASCII doctor generously provided an image where all the ASCII Docker things are already there.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you don't have to worry about how to make all the right Ruby and stuff. The ASCII Doctor people have figured that out and published it because, like we said, you have this Docker Hub idea where software vendors can publish images.
Yes. So we take their image and you see it in the Docker file. We add some extra tools that we need. For example, Veil, because it's there. And we also want to have Java, because now we can also install the EPUB checker that didn't run correctly on our local machines, but it does run in the Docker image. So we can go on. We can install British English dictionaries for Veil. We can install grammar rules. So we can make a whole style guide to work on. And of course, we can install EPUB check so that we can check if our EPUBs will probably be all right before we can open them in books or whatever.
Yeah.
We want a Node.js, and because we have our QR code generator, and that runs on JavaScript. And so everything is in the image. And then if we go on to our YAML file, which is our Docker Compose file, we still have our services. This time we call it Book Builder. We don't bother about reusing the image. We just tell it, this is the Docker file you want to use for the image. We have a command that calls a script called buildbook that basically does everything that the old Ruby setup did. And we put our node modules in a cache file, in a cache volume called node_modules_cache. So we don't litter our project with node modules.
Yes.
Then we go on with our make file. So again, we have our help system. This one is a little bit different, but it does the same things. This one also takes into account, I think it's this one, that groups the targets together. So if you have a long list of targets, this one will sort of say this is a check and this is... Can't remember if it was this one or another project I did it on, but it's possible to make some documentation that you can group your targets into groups.
Well, I mean, these are very sensible here, right? We have make our MP3 files, we have make our PDF, make our ebook, make our HTML.
Yeah. So, and while I was building this, I came to the conclusion that many of the helper directories that I had were either outdated because they were used some point in time in the project and they were no longer necessary. And then I was left with a file called MP3 files in the publish directory, which had a copy of all the audio links which were necessary to create the QR codes. And then I realized I don't have to manually update that file. I can do it in a script, which is what you do with the MP3 files. So that one creates this MP3 file with all the links to the audio files. Then that one is picked up by the QR code generation. So that one runs all the QR codes. And so basically, when you are finished with all this, go on and say, make book builder or make book. And then everything is done for you. So make build and the whole book, the PDF, the website, the EPUBs, everything is run. And then you can go on even one step further. If we use this Docker image locally with this makefile, why not use it in the GitHub action as well?
Right.
So rather than having to rebuild everything that we did locally in this GitHub action, we simply go on, change the publishing workflow for the GitHub action, and in the show notes, I put the old one and I put the new one. So the thing it does, it checks out everything and then it runs make build.
Yeah, and so we have a GitHub action using Docker, which GitHub actions are perfectly happy to do because GitHub Docker is a way of genericizing a whole big environment. So GitHub actions loves Docker because it's nice and generic. And so you just say, get the repo and run Docker. And now, if it works locally, it'll work in GitHub.
Yes.
Because it's the same thing.
Yes. Yes.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. So I was kind of chuffed when I figured out that this works. And
yeah. And so the reason this was triggered is because I never did officially end taming the terminal. I left it at part whatever of N because I felt that there was always going to be more. And that happened a few weeks ago. And we discovered that the Ruby from 4 years ago doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's nicely contained in a Docker environment. And so we can keep updating the book as and when inspiration strikes, which is powerful.
And the point now is also because this, as long as we keep this image and this container around, it will be frozen in time. So if in a few years you want to add another episode, you can simply use this image again, spin up the container, use all the old files and the old environment, and run it again without having to, maybe you switched computers in the meantime, updated your OS 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, which is definitely what's happened in the last 3 years, right? Because I'll always update to the latest version. So yeah, this is amazingly future-proof. And all of this legacy Ruby is trapped in that little container. So my cybersecurity hat doesn't even feel cranky about this. It's like, we have a little piece of self-contained obsolescence, but it's fine.
Yeah. And as you said before, you can make a branch, figure out what happens if everything updates. And if it works, then that will be the main version of the Docker container.
Merge it into main, and you've now upgraded in a controlled fashion without the risk of exploding everything.
Yeah.
So we have a path forward when we choose to do the effort of getting rid of the technical debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely fantastic. Helma, thank you very much for this entire series.
Yeah.
These show notes are going to be absolutely invaluable to, definitely to me, and I'm sure to many, many, many other listeners, because the concept of Docker has been in my mind for a long time. But to see it, first off, explained with lovely analogies, and then to see it made practical, not using a generic project, but using my projects that I know intimately, really, really helps me understand how this all hangs together, because I know how PBS works and now I see how PBS is automated, and I know I didn't know quite as well how TTT worked because it was a present, but I can see how it works, and this is extremely valuable as a gift to the PBS community, and also just an amazing learning opportunity for the whole community. And I know you spent a lot of time writing these very detailed notes.
Yes.
So thank you very much. That is extremely kind of you. And I think it's just been a fantastic experience. So thank you. The listeners won't know all the detail because wibbly wobbly timey wimey, but we're actually recording this between Christmas and New Year. So this is a lovely holiday treat for me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And It's nice. So you have some time to study it and figure out because that's the only thing we have to figure out. It works on my computer, and that doesn't mean it also works on your computer. So
probably should, though.
It
given
should,
that's the whole point of Docker. So we will discover that over the coming days, because I'm working on another PBS tidbit, which wibbly wobbly timey wimey may come out before this one or after this one. We haven't figured all that out yet. But anyway, they will all get published, and that will give me an opportunity to put all of this learning into real practice and to be better with my spelling mistakes.
Or at least figure them out before everyone sees them.
I think what you'll find, if you look at the Git history for the next while, what you're going to see is that list of words expanding as I put all of the things that I spell wrong on purpose. I'll put them into the file.
Okay. So.
Okay. Right. Thank you again.
Yes.
And if people want to follow you, the best thing, your GitHub is always a good place to see what you're up to, I guess, because you like to do open sourcey stuff. But is there anything you want to plug?
No, and I'm not very big on social media, so every now and then I pop in the Slack, the Podfeed Slack.
I was going to say the default plug is the Slack, because it's a lovely community, and if anyone is listening to PBS and has any questions and stuff, I pop in from time to time as time allows. But the amazing thing is when I pop in, other people in the community have helped out before I have a chance to answer, which is always fantastic. So podfeed.com/Slack, where you will find me and Helma, and you can message us, and it's a lovely place. So join in.
Yeah. Okay. And because it's still before New Year's Day, I will wish you Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Gelukkig nieuwjaar.
Gelukkig nieuwjaar. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
If you learn as much from Bart each week as I do, I'd like you to go over to lets-talk.ie and press one of the buttons over there to help support him. You know, during most Programming by Stealth episodes, Bart does 98% of the work, while I'm just the stooge who listens and asks the dumb questions. If you go over to lets-talk.ie, you can support him on Patreon, you can donate via PayPal, or you can use one of his referral links. I really hope you go over there and help him out. You can join other Programming by Stealth students in our Slack community at podfeed.com/Slack. You can contact me directly at allison@podfeed.com, and I encourage you to check out all of the shows we do over at podfeed.com. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.